Welcome to Best Waste Services. This is episode 6, and in a Breakman tradition, this is the first time actually we're all in one room together. So with me, I have Louise Lambaum, as always, and we're joined today by Sally Rose from Cheshire East. Welcome, Sally.
Hi.
In real life.
In real life,
Real
in one room.
people.
Three-dimensional. Yeah, it's very fun. And we have built a studio. We've even got a Waste Services podcast background.
It's epic.
Yeah, we're going pro. So yeah, this time next
I can
year.
imagine that on the side of a truck or something. We do it look like radio hosts there.
That's not actually a bad idea. Side of a truck.
Let's not do that.
Yeah, I'd be on. We'll have a truck. Put it on the side of it.
Brilliant. Can't wait for that.
Nina, get on it.
Can we change my picture? You look so much better.
Thank you.
I'm finding something very funny though.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Probably.
Can't have been you.
Probably episode 1.
Must be something completely different.
So the general format of this podcast, Sally, and I'm sure you've listened avidly to all the ones that have gone before. No, you haven't.
I've listened to some.
Yeah.
We're not going to quiz you.
So, Sally, we usually start these things with a bit of a background into who is Sally? How did you get to this? Wherever you're in life at the moment, what is your backstory? So we start with that, and then we sort of segue through into some more serious stuff, more boring stuff about waste. Tell us about yourself and how you come to be here in Barnsley.
Well, I just graduated from university and
You just graduated from university?
not now.
Oh.
And went to find a job and happened to find a job in a waste section in Nottingham City Council.
Oh,
And just sort of fell into a waste career that way and never left.
Do you know, of all the people we've spoken to, nobody has ever said, I wanted to be in the waste industry.
They have
Every single person stabbing into it. Yeah.
But they have always stayed.
Yeah,
in it.
yeah, and they either couldn't get out or decided they quite liked it.
Yeah.
The 50-50
Which is
split.
I
You
quite
like it,
like
yeah.
it, actually. So I've worked for various different councils. I spent 5 years in Herefordshire. I've been in private waste management and I've been a consultant as well. I spent quite a lot of time in waste ops management.
Right.
And then did various things to sort of build my portfolio, so to speak, and then moved into waste contracts because that was an area that I didn't have much experience in. And then that's led me to Cheshire East, where I am now.
So Cheshire East is a bit of we always find it a little bit strange because not only you're a LATCO, you've got ANSA, but ANSA also is a joint venture with some other businesses that we work with. So can you give us a bit of a backdrop into the structure of how Cheshire East delivers its waste services and a little bit about ANSA, who I know you don't actually work for technically?
No, I don't. Yeah, so Cheshire East has its own wholly owned environmental services company called ANSA, who deliver all our environmental services, waste, street cleansing, parks, grounds maintenance, all of that. They also are our managing agent for the HWRCs. And then because they were set up as a business venture as well, they then worked with Staffordshire Moorlands and High Peak under the umbrella of Alliance and deliver their waste services as well. Cheshire East has 185,000 households and we have just last year introduced chargeable garden waste, and we have fortnightly residual and commingled recycling.
Okay, yeah. So we'll talk a little bit about garden waste because that's something we've all been involved in, and by the scars. But yeah, so the structure of ANSA then they effectively report to you because presumably you manage they're one of the contracts that you manage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm client. essentially.
Yes, yeah. So I'm in common with pretty much every local authority. Financial pressures. Does a LATCO help with that, or does it help to deliver a lower cost service? We work with quite a lot of LATCOs, and it's interesting to know what the pros and cons are.
I suppose a pro is that it allows them to branch out into more commercial ventures to support themselves, which a council would struggle to do really on its own. They are definitely more flexible in terms of procurement and their sort of policies. So that often means they are quicker. So they can do things quicker. In terms of service delivery, we're quite close at Cheshire East, so we work quite closely with them. I'd say, having worked on a totally contracted out waste contract versus this one feels more like we are an in-house service. So I think it's quite a nice balance between the two, because you have a bit more involvement, a bit more control. And actually, because a lot of the people working there are ex-council employees, they still feel the same motivation in a way. When it's a totally private contract, it's very different. When I first went to Cheshire East, I was surprised at how much information I could get, and that I could just ask for things and they were like, oh yeah. Whereas in a private waste management contract situation, you really have to push to get things you want. It's not easy. So that makes it, from a contract manager's point of view, that makes it a whole lot easier. And just running the service in general, we tend really to work as one.
Because you're retaining the profits, aren't you? Turning out if there's no sort of commercial downside to sharing that information, because if it generates a greater profit or a lesser profit, that's everybody's sort of work on the same pot of money out there, which is not the case in a purely commercial arrangement.
And also, so when I am in the office, I'm actually at our purpose-built depot at the Environment Hub, so we sit with them, which in a straight client contract arrangement you would never do. No. They wouldn't like that at all. So we can just pop round the corner and go and chat to each other if there's something we need to talk about when we're in. So
I suppose if you're in a typical LATCO, you are the client and you're the only client, so you are the most important client. With ANSA sort of doing things in with Alliance in High Peak and Staffordshire and potentially other places, and I know some of the other LATCOs we're talking to are also looking to sort of branch out. You wouldn't be the only client any longer.
No, we're not. But strangely, that doesn't actually affect our day-to-day working or our relationship with them. It's very clear. There's been a very clear arrangement for quite a long time that we're not their only client, but we are the most important one. But I have to say we don't see any effects from that. And to be fair, apart from when we meet people from Alliance at events, we don't really come across them. It's almost like they're not really there. Yeah.
I mean, you're obviously our most important client, Sally. But I do say that to everybody. So, what was, as I said, you went for a paid for garden waste service. What was the service previously before it was it a universal free service?
So everyone got one free bin, and then if they wanted extra, they paid.
Okay, so they're already paying. Yeah, okay. But you took the decision.
Yeah.
The immensely popular decision.
Oh, yeah. A really popular decision. Obviously, as most councils will know now, budgets are tight, councils are struggling. Cheshire East is unitary, so it has a lot of pressures because obviously it has social care and things like that, which are a huge element of the budget.
And that's the issue for most councils. Louise and I spend a lot of time talking to waste teams who are under enormous financial pressure, but it's not financial pressure of their making. And we see a lot of the social media noise from residents who are really furious about the financial position of the council. But actually, it's something you're not in control of either, because you have a statutory duty to deliver that social care.
I think a lot of the residents, including myself, I didn't know how much the budget goes into social and what actually comes under that definition as well.
Whatever needs to be spent has to be spent.
Yeah.
and it's without your control. So the waste team are kind of left sort of trying to deliver a service with the money that's left, which is presumably is the same for you.
Yeah, it's tricky. And obviously, prices on recyclables and things, the market drops, and then so you don't have that coming in anymore. You've got inflation on the contract and things like that. So it's just, there's pressures from everywhere. So the council, the year I started in end of 22, and they were just looking at the budget and trying to find things that they could implement. Obviously, chargeable garden waste was the most obvious that they hadn't tackled. So it got voted through on the MTFS budget, and we got permission to go ahead. I started at end of November 22, and then in February 23, I was told, can you deliver us a chargeable garden waste service to be in place by the 1st of October this year? So I was like,
That's not the most lunatic timescale we've worked with.
No.
We had people ringing us in January, wanted to go live in April, and we said it doesn't matter, we can do it. You can't do it.
Yeah,
it's just not possible.
It was a miracle that it happened by the 1st of October. To be fair, it was just, and that was basically because they needed the income within that financial year.
Yes,
to offset some of the budget costs.
So just in really broad terms, because we see the technical delivery side of garden waste, what does the council have to do? The big ticket stuff. I mean, there's obviously things like, make sure you've got the containers and the activities. But what else does a council actually have to do to roll out a garden waste service that's paid for? This might not be a short answer.
Well, obviously, first you have to have permission from members.
Yes, so the political will.
Yeah. And to get that permission, you obviously have to work up options and then do various member briefings and then attend committee or full council in some instances. So there's a lot of work first to convince them that it's a good idea. And then and only then can you start putting in place, the things you need. I mean, you have to work out when do you want the service to run from. Even though we'd already got a service in place, we needed to decide what sort of time period should it run over, because because of the people paying for extra bins, it had a really weird season.
Yes,
which was very
we've already got a contract for those extra bins.
Yeah, and so obviously we also, on top of designing sort of a chargeable service around the existing service, we had to remember that there was people coming up who were due their invoices for their bins that they'd already paid for.
Yeah.
So we had to remember to tell those people that actually it would only run until December, and they would have a reduced fee. Yeah. Otherwise, everything wouldn't be in sync.
I've never thought about that side of it. If you're already charging for additional bins, the complications that will cause when you're then charging.
Yeah.
Wow. And some of these things, it sounds like you realised early on, some of these things end up going out in the woodwork quite late on. We've just done a service that has been brought in-house, and it was not known right up front that actually some residents have paid for 3 years of garden waste service in advance to the contractor. Yeah, so we've just been working on the service that's come in-house, and what we found out, not right at the beginning, was that some residents had paid the contractor 3 years in advance for their service, which was a deal that they offered presumably at the time for good reasons, but then you've got to unpick that, and the comms that are unexplained, that, and everybody's got an individual case because they've all paid for 3 years in a different time frame or whatever. So yeah, that can be quite complex. So it sounds like Cheshire East decided that we need the revenue, so the move to child waste service was primarily driven by revenue, which I think is most of the case. So is that sort of a decision that happens at sort of right at the top the financial head of the council, and then you try and persuade the politicians. Is that the rough way it works?
Yeah. So, as part of the medium-term financial plan that's set every year, ideas are put forward for income generation or savings, so that idea was suggested by the head of service. It then goes into a pot with others, and then those are presented to the members, and they have a look at which ones they think.
Yeah. So that would have been going on for several months before, or the February, you were told you've got 6 months to do this.
Yeah.
So there's a period of probably 6 months to it.
Yeah, I think it starts around October every year. Yeah. So, and I suppose perhaps because I'd not long started, I wouldn't have known about it. But also, you never know what's going to go through or not. So you don't know until that's the MTFS is set, and then it's something like.
So it's about 6 months to get the political one, then you've got 6 months to deliver it.
Yeah. And I mean, even when they make that decision, they weren't that keen on it. And I mean, we had one set of members agree, okay, we'll go with that decision. But then we then had local elections. So that was about April, me telling. Then originally we were meant to go to committee in July just to update the members. This is what's happening. We're on track. But because we'd had quite a lot of new members, when it finally got to committee in July, as we were getting there, it became more and more clear that actually it was not about us just updating. It was about were they going to
make a decision again.
Yeah. Which, in July, when you've got a 1st of October start date, was like...
And contracts were in place.
Yeah. And in fact, I think we were just about to sign our contract with you guys, and we were like, well, we can't do it.
And Ants were already in contract with us. So.
It was literally days, wasn't it?
It was, because then they called it. It got through, but then it got called in. So we had 2 weeks of waiting, and I mean, we were lucky in that those 2 weeks were quick. That was a quick call in.
Yeah.
Because any longer than that, we would have missed the go live date. So that just added a bit more excitement in there.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. I mean, everything was so close. Obviously we had to go procure for the permits and the timescales on that because of the value. I mean, that was super close as well, really. Any slip up in that, and we would have, again, not been ready for the deadline. So, I mean, there was a lot of me jumping up and down and making sure, like, no, this is the deadline. There was a lot of people trying to move. Oh, well, can't we just move this deadline by like a few weeks or something? Because there was a lot of me going, no, right from the start, you've been told that's the deadline. Which, again, made things interesting.
So presumably there's a comms plan in place for community health residents.
Yes, so luckily we have a really good comms manager that I work with. So as soon as I heard, I put together a project team. At first, a basic project team, so that was PR, customer services, someone from Answer, and then myself. And we started with that basic project team. So myself and Rhiannon, who is the comms manager, worked on the PR, and I've done garden waste elsewhere. So I was like, we need to brand it. It needs to be really clear. Yeah. It's a chargeable service now. Yeah. We want it to stand out, and we need to get the message out. Yeah. So
it's a product, isn't it?
It is a product.
I thought it was beautifully done. Yeah. I do think it was really, and I always give out you as an example to councils going live now with how you did it, and the message was really clear and pretty,
engaging
and noticeable.
we spent, which is nice to hear, because we did spend a lot of time making sure that the message that was going out was clear and that there was as much information out there as possible. And then, the design company. So, myself and Rhiannon, we sort of went online and looked at other councils and then looked at other designs. And we both separately did like a bit of a Pinterest board and then sent it to each other. and we were like, oh, we didn't know each one was doing it, but actually we'd picked fairly similar themes. And originally we were going to go with a strap line, because some other authorities have a strap line. Yeah. But actually in the end it didn't work. The design that we got carried itself. The strap line was a bit, it just didn't seem to work.
But it's not the dull, boring corporate colours. It doesn't say Cheshire East all over it. It says flowers and an environment and it's a bit playful, a bit, bit of fun.
Yeah, and we were very lucky that our web team did actually allow us to completely brand the page, because that I was told at the start that that's really unlikely that's going to happen. Don't get your hopes up. But it did, and it looks really nice, and that really helped. So that was really good. I think also based on what I've done elsewhere, when we first did comms, we did comms about why we're doing it. We held off on the comms for the service and tried to explain to people, this is why it's happening. We did a huge list of, what we call not frequently asked questions, because we're not allowed to put frequently asked questions on our website. So they're not frequently asked questions.
Infrequently asked questions. Yeah. People with things that people never asked you.
Someone may have asked this at some point.
And it was comprehensive. We had a lot of, and that customer services had it. They had a lot of information. They were involved in the decisions. And so we ran for a few months with that information. And then I think it was about in August time, we transitioned into the actual PR and comms for the actual service to kind of give that gap and hope that people will have their say, but then move on.
How was it received? At that beginning, how was it received by the residents?
Not well. It's not popular.
You pay for something that you used to get for free.
For free. It's never popular, but then I think there's a scale, isn't there, of unpopularity and then absolute venom.
We've talked about this before. It's quite easy to look at a Facebook page or a Twitter stream or something. X. I'm so old-fashioned. It's really easy to look at that and sort of get the absolutely venomous opinions of 10 people and think that's...
Oh, yeah.
So how do you measure the actual response other than just looking at the people with the pitchforks?
I think a better way, really, social media was quite brutal, but you realise...
Keyboard warriors, you hide behind that.
You realise they were the minority. I think the better way was to see the complaints or inquiries that we were getting in, which gave a bit more of an overlap. So you'd still got that I'm really angry about this, but then we got a lot of people who hadn't read the website who were asking us questions about it. So they were asking customer services, so they were able to direct them, luckily, to the webpage where we'd got a lot of information. And I think that was a better judge. So you knew that you'd got people who were like, I'm asking questions. So you were like, well, if they're asking questions, they're not totally negative. They want to know about it. And then you've still got the pitchforks and, there's a lot of noise, as there was the last time I did Garden Waste, about I pay for this in my council tax. And it was we went through lots of different versions before we actually got one that we thought was right to put in the PR about trying to explain that.
It is the education, isn't it? I mean, I didn't know either a lot of what I found out since getting into waste. I don't think I'd ever given it that much thought either. But the assumption that that is or should be part of the service, and the fact that we don't know as residents what other things you guys have to do and pay for. I think all residents generally assume that the only thing we're paying our council tax for is to get our bins collected for free. And I was probably one of them. I mean, I'd never gave much thought, but I definitely didn't know how it was all broken down and what goes where. And the bins collections is tiny.
There was a survey years ago.
Money.
There was a survey years ago where they polled general public about how much of their, let's say it's £1,000 a year, as it was probably was then. Out of your £1,000 a year council tax, how much of that is actually spent on waste? And I think at the time the average was around 30 to 40 pounds a year per household. People's perception was that it was like £500-600.
Yeah.
That half of the council tax they pay is for their bin collection. And when you actually tell them,
see everything else,
just anything else. No, the roads just are there by magic. And if you don't use social care and you don't go to election, you don't see any of it. So yeah, the only thing that everybody sees every week is the bins and of course the potholes, and you only see potholes because the council screwed up and not repaired them. So yeah, you don't see any of the other stuff. So people do really underestimate what councils have to spend their money on, and the big bulk of it is going on stuff that's large and visible.
And getting that message out that there's no money is crazy to have to explain to people what actually,
that's the thing that surprised me from doing GOS, is that generally people don't care about saving council money because they don't see it as their money. It's like the council have all my money and they waste it on massive salaries for Sally and this sort of stuff. Yeah, and they don't actually see that. Well, if we save the council money, that's our money, and people don't care about that.
And they can put it into better places.
Yeah,
like don't put a nappy in the recycling bin would probably go a long way.
Yeah. And so
saving a bit of money.
If you don't throw your crisp packets out the car window, that's saving the council exactly. And people don't see that, and it's quite dispiriting. But I don't think in day to day, being inconvenienced, I don't think people care about the environment. They care about it until they actually make a change. They don't care.
Do something outside the ordinary.
They don't care about the council saving money. So,
that is a massive generalisation, but I think that is correct.
It is, yeah.
There are the minority, isn't there?
Yeah. There's the 10% who will always do everything for that. There's the 10% who never ever will.
Yeah.
The 80% in the middle. What do those people care about? Putting you on the spot.
Yeah. I think convenience.
Yeah, the quality of the service.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing we had to stress to answer was that now it's chargeable. This service needs to be brought on. I mean, not that we deliver bad services for the other materials, but people will now see this as, it's chargeable. It's like a service anywhere else that they get. Yeah. So it's got to be spot on. So I think, and that's how we'll get people to sign up. The fact that if they say to someone else, oh, actually, it's good, it's really convenient, and they turn up and that's what they care about, then there are people who care that, okay, it's being recycled, but people just want their rubbish gone.
Yes.
And sometimes it does feel a bit like some people out there think there's just magic pixies that are coming along and collect my waste and clean the streets and things. So
I think it's education, isn't it? Getting more messages out there. I remember around COVID, I felt very protective over councils because I did know what councils were doing and what they were responsible for. But I don't think that message was put out to the masses. And they're all whinging about things not happening because they didn't know. And I had numerous conversations with people about it to the point of that's not what's happening. Do you know there's hardly any staff in? They're really under pressure, and they've been given all this extra pressure from the government of who they've got to look after from a welfare point of view. Is your garden waste bin that important? Really, is it?
People get very, very possessive about their bin.
Yeah, very possessive over their bin. Yeah.
And I've also, there's a peculiarly British obsession, but I don't think it's the same the world up. Because like you said, people just want it gone.
Yeah.
So because when you start to charge for it, you make it into a retail experience.
Yeah.
And this Louise and I sort of sell a lot to councils, in our sort of professional capacity, sort of trying to sell systems. But this is now a discretionary service that you want people to pay for. They still have the option of hiding it in the grey bin. And you've got to strike that balance between, yes, you're going to pay for it, but now it's a retail experience. You've got to offer a good experience. And that's got to be right from the beginning, right at the comms of, why do you want this service, right through to that delivery of actually picking up the bin and beyond to explaining, why it was a good thing that you did that. So, yeah, and you've done that because you created a brand for it, a nice, fluffy, retail-friendly brand rather than the stuffy, boring council masthead. Yeah. And through our wonderful product, you've got an online sign-up, which is convenient for residents, and you're giving them something physical that they've got the permit. And I think that's also enabling your waste collectors, particularly in the early days, to actually really deliver that service well and find out the ones who hadn't subscribed. Because the other danger, of course, is that you put the subscription service in, but it's leaky and people cannot subscribe until you get the big collectors, which are the ones that all think.
And people get very, very upset about that. I didn't get many, but I saw one last week where someone had written in, well, the bin men have been collecting this, and this bin, and they haven't got permits on them. And, it's just disgraceful. We paid, and they get quite upset. Now, thankfully, we've not had many of those, but when we have, we've been able to go, it's okay, the crew checked the in-cab system. These people have subscribed. They're not just taking random bins. They're
actually... terrible permit come there.
No, fast times there. Goodness me.
So, that's another important thing, that you can go back to those people with, no, that's not happening.
Yeah.
This is a really tight system. There was a lot of questions during development, and I know other councils have had this question, asked of them when they're designing their chargeable guideways, why do you need a permit? Well, because it not only helps the crews, but it helps the customers. So, whilst, you do get the ones that go, they're collecting that bin and it hasn't got a permit. If you've got a good system, you can go back to them and go, no, actually, the crew's checked it. It's got a subscription. They're just waiting for their permit.
Yeah.
And it cuts down on that noise. If you've got bins with no identification, people are just going to wind themselves up about who's got a subscription. How do you know they have or haven't?
Yeah.
And for the first 2 weeks of the service, we didn't make this public to the customers, but for the first 2 weeks of the service, the crews were checking the in-cab system and the permits for every single bin that was out, every single bin. Just because we wanted to make sure those first few weeks that they were delivered, it was done well. But the amount it slowed the crews down, having to do that, it wouldn't have been sustainable to keep that going. So, some authorities that haven't had permits and they're checking their in-cab systems, I'm not sure how they're sustaining that because the crews just couldn't.
They're not. I think is the answer.
They're telling themselves that they're checking, but they're not because, I've spent enough time, on trucks and at the back of trucks to know that, what loaders do, because they've got to get the productivity. What loaders do is they drive down the street and they pick up every bin that's out, unless it's contaminated or really overweight. It's the fastest way to do that job is just to put the bin on the back of the wagon. It takes longer to go ask the driver, is this got a permit? Is it not? And then, I've got to do it anyway. So they just put it on. And I think I was quite impressed by the approach our crews took in the early weeks. They were really, they took it quite personally. They really wanted to get it done.
Yeah. And I believe that is because, ANSA started team briefings with them so it started about June or July. So they had team briefings. We shared the permits. We shared the welcome letter. They saw the envelope. Everything that was going out, they saw. They had copies of the frequently asked questions. They had everything. And they had, I think, about 3 sets of briefings running up to it. And the crews are really committed to it. Yeah, I mean, in those 2 weeks, they really did commit to checking every single bin. And they were actually worried about it. They cared that the service did well. And, if you've got that is, I mean, I know as an operational manager, often you're only as good as your frontline teams. Yeah. So they did all credit. Yeah.
And you started the Peshawar service at the worst possible time of year, didn't you?
Yeah.
Just after Christmas in the dark and cold and wet of January. Yeah, that's really not the time to be asking crews to slow down and look at permits and then check the in-cab when it's absolutely soiling down with rain and it's, So all credit to them for doing it at that time.
And we were lucky that I think we got a bit of snow just before, because we were all sat there going, you know what, on the 15th, we're going to have about 10 inches of snow.
Why haven't you put some Lego on the list? I mowed my lawn in the snow and oh my God, where's picking up? Yeah.
And then after that, actually, we did have some quite severe frosts. But again, the crews were really good. They were, obviously, because when they're trying to empty, they were losing quite a few bins in the back.
Yeah.
And of course, you kind of think about it, but you don't until it happens. And then you're like, oh, that's their permit gone.
Yeah.
As well. Not just, and the crews were really good in that they were reporting the work. They go, oh no, that's got a permit. And then we were getting the information through and then, and it was only a handful, it wasn't loads, but then we were able to so they auto get a new bin when that happens.
Yeah.
But then, we were going into the permissive system and automatically ordering them new permits at the end of each day. Yeah. So when customers were ringing in, they were being told, oh, it's okay, your bin's going to turn up. Oh, and your permit's been reordered.
Very smooth.
And you don't really need to do anything. So
that's why we always advise, don't put the permit on the lid of the bin. Because so many lids do come off. Yeah. And then you're like, you've got to replace the lid and the permit each time, whereas the percentages of bins are smaller.
The bin loss on the back of the wagon is, in some councils, it almost never happens. In other places, they're dropping in like flies because it's just the age of the bin stock, the quality of the bin, how long it's been out in the sun. We've got some authorities where it's just all the time. And others where they're saying, does that ever happen?
Stat. I haven't done a report on the stats recently on the replacement reasons. I might do it because it's the highest percentage is stuck to the wrong bin still.
Yeah.
Right. Which is pretty impressive. Yeah. And then that's across all councils that we work with, which is 80 renewals. We've got 100 we work with, but I can't use their stats yet. And out of all of those, the most common reason is stuck to the wrong bin. Yeah. Even when they have an image on the permit of the colour of the bin, they're still doing that.
Yeah, stuck on. Yeah, in the early days. Yeah, I have why do they want a replacement? They stuck it to their recycling bin. So they stuck it to their residual bin.
Yeah.
I know when I put my bin out on a Monday night in the winter when it's dark, the grey bin, brown bin, and the green bin all look exactly the same in the dark. The blue.
Are you going to be putting your permit on in the dark?
But people, that's where I was going to go with it. I do often have to get my phone out and use the torch to see which actually is the grey one. Oh yeah,
but I'm sticking my phone on it. Yeah. So it must confusing. There's so many different councils on there as well, all different colours. Do I test all the different things? And if we change an adhesive, I like to test it. So we just do random ones, and they're all over. I've never been grilled on it yet. No. You thought they might ask, why are these on there?
Right. So that's the number one reason people reprint permits
at the moment. Yeah, I haven't done the report this year, so we've just gone through our busiest. So January, February, March are the busiest, although it's not slowing down that much because councils are moving it out. April's normally a bit quieter because we do tend to advise not to go live in April because of council tax and other priorities that councils have. But we're still doing about 35,000 a day permits, so it's not really slowing down that much. But I need to do the report to see what the most common. Also, I can tell how the replacements are going to go in terms of some of the decisions that they make. So if a council has a large space between sending the permit out and going live, they get lost.
Yeah.
and they get chucked on the side, oh, I'll put it on another time. And if they're not clear of their comms, I think if they said, put it on your bin straight away, if the bin was there, but it's not. And then we've had a recent one where they were changing the bins. So I said, don't send out the permit yet, because you're going to get such a percentage putting it on the old bin. And that's happened, and such a high percentage. So I'll take them out of my stats, because that would just look crazy. But yeah, I'll let you know what it comes out. But yeah, the last 3 years has been stuck to the wrong bin.
Well,
we have had people as well where to put the sticker on your bin is actually on the back of the permit that you have to peel off, with a little diagram of where to stick it. And we have had people going, well, I don't know where to stick it. Where are the instructions?
Yeah.
On the back of the permit.
Yeah, there's sometimes you can't account for everything.
Well, it's one of the things that we're going to talk about it once we finish recording this, but we've got a sort of a next phase of things that we're wanting to improve around the whole circuit of the permit delivery. And one of those things is putting that permit instruction on our portal, so residents can see, as part of that email they get about, thank you for joining, this is what's going to happen. Getting that picture of the actual permit they're going to get, and giving that some of that instruction electronically up front before they get the permit, and then also being able to see online whether your permit has been shipped. So again, you can say, we haven't shipped it yet. So these are the things that we're
that would be useful. That would be really useful for them to see.
Particularly in this situation where you've got maybe an 8 to 12 week delay. We do this long lead-in window. Actually, we're going to send the permit out quite close to the service start. People say, well, where's my permit? I ordered it weeks ago. So again, that explanation up front.
And we have, like I've said at some of the presentations, got about an 85% engagement with the online portal.
I was going to say, what's your stat? That's really high.
So I mean, it's obviously people really embrace the digital aspect, so it would seem logical they can go on there and get other things.
Because people are still saying, when I have conversations with councils now, and I say about this new technology and helping with misbins, contamination, general communication, it can only be a good thing when you're offering a new chargeable service. It adds something extra. They still are under the assumption that because it's an older demographic generally that sign up to the garden waste, that the contact would be small percentages. I think, 90% of people in the UK have got a smartphone now?
Yeah.
So one would assume, therefore, that they are using it. And also, it's not necessarily just a phone; it's any device, isn't it now? And they are more.
So the stats for the Cheshire East system, we get the Google Analytics and all that sort of stuff. So over 50% of subscriptions are done through a smartphone. So so it's about 50%, but it is slightly weighted towards the thing, and that's the one that's growing. So so your online tech needs to be something that's going to work on a phone, and council forms often don't, so that's something to look at. But the demographic thing, we've done systems in authorities where it's sort of a coastal retirement town sort of place, quite an old demographic, and you're still getting 80+% people signing up online. And actually, the other interesting stat is of the people who choose to ring up. So maybe that's sort of 15 to 20% who are still doing a manual call. About a quarter of those people leave you an email address. So they are online. And then actually, when you send them the renewal, you send that to the email address they gave you, because it's an established relationship and it's not just something that they've read in the paper or got through a link. They're quite happy to renew that. So you actually then shift it out even more. So it's perfectly reasonable to expect that
what does the resident
85-90%.
What does the resident see? So when they they've signed up and everything, that's all normal. But if they're going in, what's the main reason why they're going there? Looking to see their calendar.
So this is where you start to snowball it. So the start as Cheshire East was to get people to subscribe. But then if you've got some added value to that, is to say, well, first of all, we say when your subscription starts and finishes. Now, in your case, it's a fixed annual period, isn't it? A lot of authorities, it's, as in my bid, it should be the day you sign up, you get told them from there, and it sort of rolls on. So you can see when your subscription's coming up. You can see how many bins you subscribed. You've got the option to order an additional bin mid-year if you want to.
So they can see all their bins, not just garden waste.
They can see all of their bins, so they can see when to...
And all their calendars.
But also they can see whether the collection's happened or not. So if the answer crew go down the street and there's a garden waste bin there, but it's contaminated, so they're going to not collect it or mark it contaminated in the that immediately shows on the customer's screen you didn't claim a bin because it was contaminated. And that actually knocks on then to they feel that they know why, so they don't rig past you. And you've got that education option, and you're basically in charge of it. So it's a lazy it's sort of a lazy comparison that I use all the time because I'm lazy. Compared to the Amazon experience or the John Lewis experience, you go online, you see a nice retail product. So you've got the flowers and the meadows and of your branding. You buy, you get the email thanking you for buying, and then you get, if you buy something from John Lewis, Fred's gone into the warehouse and picked it. It's now, on the van, and Gary's bringing it in the van, and then you get the thing to say the van will be with you in 15 minutes. Then you get the thing to say we've delivered it, and then the server to say how there's lots of communication, and at all times you kind of feel like they're in charge and they're making this happen.
And then you don't have to ask a question.
Yeah, and the council experience with bins usually is to say, well, put your bin out, and then if you're not happy with it, ring us up and ask us. And it's very passive, and you're immediately on the back foot in every interaction.
And that can't help the council because getting the call rate is
a really expensive way of doing it.
Really expensive way of doing it. Yeah. And they're never particularly nice.
No, and it's part of that shift now that councils are experiencing, that you're trying to sell revenue-generating services. Mm-hmm. So you're not really just sort of sat there hoping that nobody calls and delivering the service you can with the money you've got. You're actually now trying to sort of say, look at this, isn't this good? Would you like to do this? So, that positive communication is, I think, where councils are going to have to move to.
Yeah. And you've had a really good sign-up rate.
Yeah. Yeah, we're on over 85,000 permits at the moment. So, yeah.
And that didn't all happen overnight, did it? It wasn't just 85,000 people wanted it and they signed up. No, it has actually kept growing.
It kind of went gradually. Then, what month was our biggest? So, October we were like, oh, wow. Mm. When we actually thought it would start quite slowly. Well, actually, I said it wouldn't start quite slowly, but most people thought it would start quite slowly, but it did go. And then I think, was it? So the January period, it just went like through the roof. It's our biggest. It was the biggest time period by far. I was looking at the stats the other day for each time month, and I was like, oh, that one just blew everything out of the water. And
that was the period where if you don't do it in January, you're not going to get your bin collected.
Yeah.
And your bin, which will come to another, but your bin is not just a garden bin, it's a garden and food bin. So it's not quite as seasonal as a pure garden bin. Yeah. What we've seen with councils that sign up in April, sign up for a starter bin in April. Nobody particularly wants to pay for a garden waste bin in December because it's Christmas, they've got better things to spend their money on, and they're not mowing the lawn in December. So we've found that the December and January is quite flat, which is the opposite of your experience because you were starting your service in January. Yeah. But actually, you can actually see when January payday is.
Yeah.
Because people go, right, okay, now I'm going to vote. Now I'm going to say, and those last few days in January after payday, everybody's signing up.
Every council is the same though. There's always the same spikes. Doesn't matter when they go live. It's usually very seasonal. Mm. And it also, that year one is also similar for all councils in year one because people are annoyed. So you get the people who aren't as annoyed. Then you get the annoyed people. By April, the annoyed people have signed up. Yeah. By July, the next lot of even more annoyed people are signed up. So
definitely weren't going to get
fed up. Yeah. And I need to get over it now. Yeah. And then by October, where you're at, really. Then the rest of them are just dribs and drabs, but it always works like that for everyone. You can just see these spikes, and it's seasonal and just depends on how annoyed a resident is. Yeah. And then by October, when they're shutting down their garden, they're so annoyed of being going to the tip that they want to do the pay for service.
So you didn't do an early bird discount, did you?
No. We discussed it because I'd done it elsewhere and it was really successful. So we did discuss it, but when we worked out the figures, obviously because it was all based on trying to bring in more money for that financial year, it just wasn't doable.
No, and I think up until doing your project, I was always quite in favour of the early bird because I saw how many subscriptions it brought in early on. But actually, I think I'm now persuaded that early birds are actually a bad idea because, yes, it brings forward the subscriptions where you've got a long lead in, so you get a big hit of cash, which is not really, you're not trying to generate cash, you're trying to generate long-term revenue. Actually, without the early bird, you've still got a very high sign-up rate. So I think the early bird brings it forward, which if you're in a private industry and you wanted the cash flow, that would be great, but you're not in that position. So, just holding your price.
Right. I'm also, having experienced this, wonder if the early bird in the first year brings people in, but then having been like in an area where there was an early bird, I paid the early bird, and then the next time round, it was the full price. There was no early bird.
Yeah.
You sort of go,
the full price up. Yeah.
So I think what you actually do is, although you knew it was always going to be that price, it was just that it was an early bird fee. You almost delay that to your second year. Yeah. And I think you might get a dropout rate, maybe not a massive one, but a bit of a dropout rate in your second year because people go, ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, now that's hit me a bit harder than that.
It's always negative year one because no one wants to pay.
Yeah, no one wants.
But year two, it does seem to calm down. And that's why when people are looking to put their prices up year two, right, just give yourself a year off. And then the third year, go big. Don't just do it by £1 because you're going to annoy everyone again. So you might as well go in at actually what you need to run the best service. And you're still going to annoy the same people with £1 or a tenner. Yeah. It's the same amount of people. But yeah, year two, you should see a plateau.
Yeah. Depends what happens with that price.
So folks, the upshot is don't do an early bird. That's the consensus from the room.
Yeah, that is it.
Yeah, that brings us on to pricing and how does a council, how did Cheshire East set the price for the service? Because the thing that really winds me when I talk to council is say, oh yeah, we had a look at one next door charging, and that seems like a terrible way of setting the price.
So we looked at SITs and nearest neighbours, which are spread all over the country, and to have a look at what they were charging. We also used another one of those similar to nearest neighbours and had a look at those. Unfortunately, it turned out we were a bit of an island when it came to charging, because I was like, nearly all councils are charging for garden waste. And then we looked at the SITs and nearest neighbours and then our councils around us, and we were like literally, apart from Cheshire West, sort of surrounded by probably the only councils left in the UK that don't charge. So it was like, great. So yeah, and some of our SITs and nearest neighbours were sort of bigger councils, more down south. So obviously their charges were fairly high. We did look at Cheshire West next door because they were already charging. And then looked at what did we need to do income, and then sort of did set it at that 56 mark. Also, I mean, what we also did was we looked at the charge that people were already paying for their extra bins, which was nearly there anyway. So it would have been weird for us to set the charge for the chargeable service lower than what they'd been paying for their extra bins. So that almost gave us like a floor, not to drop below. Interestingly, when we spoke to Cheshire West, they were like, when they'd sort of heard what prices we were considering, they were like, maybe we can put ours up. So we sort of knew that they might consider that. So then it would. So that's how we worked ours out.
What stats have you got on what it actually costs you to deliver the service? Because it's advertised as sort of cost recovery, isn't it? That's what you're supposed to be trying to do.
Yeah. So we did quite in depth. Well, we cost in depth the introduction of the service, because obviously you have to take all that into account in the first year of
awful IT suppliers who are rinsing for every penny.
And then obviously ANZUP provide their running costs. So we actually gave them about 12 months on not having to reorganise their crews, because from experience you need to set in. If you start cutting it too soon, you'll be in a mess.
Yes.
Actually, what they did do was having a little bit of a reorganise anyway before they actually started in January. So that was okay. They had to do, it was about 4 weeks in, they had to do a bit of a tweak and add in a bit more.
Yeah.
So which proved it was good. We didn't set them like a really high bar to reduce their costs. Right? So currently we had a target for the financial year that's just gone and a target for this financial year. We know that we were just under our target for last financial year. But we're still taking it as a positive because actually a lot of people thought it wouldn't even get there. So
I definitely echo what you're saying about keeping the capacity in year one, because just politically you need it to be a successful service. So you need to have the ability to deliver. You could get snow in the first couple of weeks, and obviously you need to have the ability to deliver that service well. You're getting the revenue. Yeah, so I would definitely say because by year 2 you're going to know how many people are subscribing, and also the other unknown is, of the people who subscribe, you would presume that they're the ones that are the most heavy users of the service. So your average bin weight is going to go up. So being able to do a route optimization with those unknowns of how many and how heavy is quite difficult. So I would definitely say they're on the side of keeping things as they are, knowing that you'll have some overcapacity in that first year. Operationally, you can always trim a bit off as you go along.
Then do you recommend year 2 doing what, route optimization?
Well, I would say by the time you get into, if you're running a year-to-year service, then I would say that once you're sort of 3 or 4 months into that service, you've got a good idea of how many people will sign up. The seasonality is going to be as season as it always was. So you'll know how many people sign up, and you'll know what the average bin weight is likely to be. So that gives you an operation manager might just say, well, looking at that, I know I can just chop the route out and do some manual optimization. You can sort of do that in situ. You then might go in the second year saying, again, depending on the geography, you might find that you've got one area of your patch is much more heavily subscribed than another, in which case in year 2 you're going to change some collection days.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you can build it into your renewal process to say, yes, thank you for renewing. By the way, we're not going to be collecting on Tuesday, we're going to be collecting on Thursday. So you do that bigger re-optimization for the second year.
Can you see that on Collective? Areas of sign-up? Because I've always found that quite interesting. I get asked that quite a lot about areas and why. And that's one good thing about having a permit, I guess, is also sales. Because people will see there's a permit and go, what's that? Oh, it's a pay for, I will do it. But it's quite nice to know why certain areas have more. I mean, obviously, more gardens in that area. That's one obvious thing. It's a good thing.
When it's a free service, you'll find that people with small gardens will still be putting out a bin, but they'll be very little in it because they've got a small lawn or a small garden. But they've got a free bin, so they're still going to be putting it out.
Yeah.
So that crew is probably going to have a moderately lower presentation rate, much lighter bins, but they've still got to drive that street because they've got to pick up those bins. Even if there's only one bin out, they've still got to cover that ground. When you go to subscriptions, you'll find that people with small gardens probably will be less likely to subscribe. So you might have whole streets that you no longer have to traverse because there's just nobody there. So the suburban centre, you might find you're just not going there at all. Go to the big gardens in the suburbs, they're still going to be subscribing.
Yeah.
They're still going to be putting out the same weight of bin. So actually, you'll be chopping down your capacity. You'll be chopping down more in one part of the borough than another, which may lead you to change some collection days.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So you're not going to do that piecemeal. That's something you can do as part of a big optimization. But in the first instance, as you go through that first year, Arts Manager will be able to chop things around a little bit.
How then would a council manage this without the technology? Because councils do.
I like to pens. I was doing it before. You just blimey, it's 11. Fred's back already. And George is just coming at 2:30. So actually, I'm going to have a word with him. I'm going to move 4 streets off him and onto him. And,
I spent.
It's really imprecise.
Yeah, a lot of my career with big blown up maps and highlighter pens. Restructure. I mean, in fact, the first time I introduced garden waste, it was with big maps and highlighter pens.
Yeah.
And obviously then you rely on your drivers. Your drivers in the lot.
I was going to say you would have to rely on them, wouldn't you? Because they're the ones that would know what's out there. And Well, yeah, but then are they driving around? Because I know one particular council that literally they just drive around aimlessly just looking for garden wasters because they don't know where they are. So that cannot be productive.
It's no different to residual recycling. You don't know what the presentation is going to be, but you've got to drive past. So
you would think with those two that they're going to have fairly full. I mean, obviously, there's small households, I guess. I mean, mine are always full. And us as neighbours, we'll text each other, go, how full's your recycling? And if anyone's away on holiday, theirs is full. Ours are always full. I mean, we're probably in the rounds where I need another recycling bin.
Yeah.
Because I really do try, especially now I'm in the sector, to recycle what I can. Yeah. And we've all got busy families on our street. So I think we've got a very high recycling rate on our, we've never got an empty bin. That's for sure. I can imagine bungalow, just one person living in it. It's going to be an empty bin, isn't it? Or one bag in it.
Yeah. And obviously garden waste is much more seasonal. So, but there might be a bin out. So you've got to, if someone on that street is subscribed, you've got to drive past to see if the bin's out. Which, there are better ways of doing that, but that's another step.
Controversial scan to collect.
Well, it works for clinical waste. We know it works for clinical waste. We've been nominated for an award for it, which you recuse yourself from judging. But yes, so
I could not judge that. I can't pass comment.
So where you've got infrequent collections and things like the coffee pod recycling, those micro collections, you can give people a bin, but you don't want to be driving around the whole borough. But do something really simple on-demand QR code or a web page or a text message.
So is your concept charge on collect?
The technology exists. Yeah, so why do you have to subscribe?
Yeah, so it'd be, I need a collection. So instead of being £55 a year, you would pay a £5 collection. So then you're only paying for what you've getting collected and you're only collecting. Would the savings be there?
No.
Yeah.
No. It'd be horribly inefficient because basically what you would then get is, because if it's, let's say it's £5 or £10 a bin, you're only going to put your bin out full. Yeah. So, it's efficient in that respect, but the truck's still got to do all that mileage. They're going to pick up lots of heavy bins. They're going to break more bins. More bins are going to jam solid. So we mentioned earlier that you have food waste in your garden bin.
Yes.
Now, you're not going to be allowed to do that from 2026 in theory. What's your plan for commingled food and garden? Do you want us to charge for it because you've got food in one of them, simply recycling?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Therefore, have should. So as part of this, our chargeable garden waste, we were like, oh no, we're going to have to remove the food waste from the garden waste bins, and then we heard on the grapevine that DEFRA had said to someone informally, no, it's okay. You can keep it in. So we were having a chat in the team about this. So I said, well, have we actually asked DEFRA formally?
Yes.
We were like, no. Okay, let's
look down the pub said.
And this was quite near towards the deadline of, for PR and stuff. Yeah. So we actually asked DEFRA formally and genuinely didn't really think that we'd get a response. And actually they did come back and go, no, it's fine. You can keep the food waste in the garden waste. As long as you're not charging for the food waste, it can still go in there. Okay. And then the simpler recycling actual legislation and stuff came out, and within that they've said it can be commingled even with a chargeable collection.
Right.
But does that mean you're going to have to still offer bins, food waste bins for everyone else?
What they said was, that it has to be weekly. So even if you decide, we're going to stay with commingled food and garden, your food waste still has to be weekly. So you still have to find a way to provide that weekly, which then, we're having feasibility studies done at the moment on different options. But that brings into question, is the commingled, is it still viable? Does it bring in efficiencies even when you're having to do, or are you best going with a straight out separate weekly food?
If you're going to have to collect it weekly, even if it's commingled, then you're going to be buying a whole heap of trucks to.
Yeah, but, and I mean, also, when you've got a chargeable garden waste service, not everyone is on that service.
So you've got to provide food waste for those people.
So then you kind of end up with this very weird hybrid system. But I mean, we have got different feasibility options being modelled at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see what that comes out with. But, yeah.
So my understanding was that your two options really were separate them out, so do whatever you want to do with the garden, keep charging for it, and provide the weekly free food waste, this sort of caddy. Or you commingle, in which case it has to be free and weekly. And I know some authorities look at it simply because they just don't have room for food waste vehicles, so they're going to have to just keep doing commingled, but they're still going to have to do it weekly, so they're still going to need more vehicles. So it's there's no easy way out of it.
No. And I mean, we left all our garden bins with residents, which wasn't popular, but we did. So, I mean, I suppose we could work on the basis where everyone's still got their garden waste bins. So they could just put that bin out weekly. For those residents that are not subscribed, they put it out weekly with just food waste in it. And then for those that are subscribed,
it's a huge bin just for food, isn't it?
But how are you going to, that's not going to empty well, it's not going
to... Maybe we need to do an event on how to do food waste.
We've done 8 so far.
Huh?
Yeah, we've done a roadshow.
You've done on just food waste?
On simple recycling, which by de facto is pretty much all about food waste. And it's our next one next week. No, it's not. Our next one's on Wednesday. Sorry,
so you can come on.
Yes.
When was it, Tim?
Yeah, I like that rock star who comes to publicise his album. I can't remember the name of it. So we've done a set of roadshow events, and it's quite clear that some authorities are way ahead of others in terms of their thinking, and it very much depends on where they're starting from. And there's still a lot of uncertainty and doubt about how much of this is actually going to get implemented. We had a very, very strong, no, this is how it's going to be, initiative from DEFRA, but Rotherham have just been told that they don't have to do a separate food waste collection because of the way that they process food currently. They can carry on doing what they're doing. I think, is it Wiltshire have got a delay, so they contractual arrangements. So the chinks are starting to appear, and I think some of it is being pushed back.
Do you know what percentage of councils in the UK currently do food waste? Because my council...
The last number I had was something like 130 odd, so about a third.
Okay,
yeah. That's a little bit more than a third of councils.
We've never done food waste, so in my council at the moment, everyone's trying to they're introducing it slowly, like certain parts of the area, and people just aren't getting on board yet. At all, actually. But I think they're rolling out the next phase at the moment. I don't think the comms have been there either. I mean, I haven't seen anything, and I'm actively looking, and I've not seen anything. So I'm curious to see how councils who have never done it before, how they actually do this and get the buy-in from residents on how to do it. And I think that takes quite a while.
It does, and if every council has to do it at a local level, because they're all doing it differently, it's very difficult. I mean, one of the potential benefits of simpler recycling is that we can start doing a national message, because everybody will be getting their food waste collected, but separately, because now the chinks are appearing, and it's not going to be everybody, it's going to be almost everybody. So that ability to have a national campaign and a national conversation about food waste hasn't been there, because
so that simpler recycling is kind of in question a little bit there, isn't it?
It's in conflict, but the idea that we can have a national campaign and conversation about food waste, it'll start to get into public consciousness when people in Hollyoaks are doing food waste, putting their food bin out.
Hollyoaks, wow! How often do you watch that?
Very regularly.
Wow. This is new information for me to mock you about.
Once every 5 years. I've never, full disclosure, I've never ever watched Hollyoaks. So
I'm impressed you know it exists.
Yeah.
I haven't watched that since it first started. Blimey.
But when you get into the public consciousness,
it has to be.
It will become more of a thing.
And to understand how it works, because even I don't understand how it's going to work in terms of so from a resident's point of view, me being a resident, where's it going to go in my kitchen?
Yeah.
How often am I going to have to fill that, empty that. Then where do I put the caddy?
And that's still going to be different in every council, because every council is still going to have a different method of delivery because they can choose their own. So, it might be a caddy. It might be a 5 litre caddy. It might be a small bin. It might have a liner. It might not have a liner. It might be, collected from your curbside. It might be collected from your doors. Who knows?
Yeah.
It's going to be different everywhere. So it's just still going to be
the liners sometimes are chargeable, aren't they? Because I saw one council, one of my friends lives in, they introduced it must be about 5 years ago now, and they supplied the liners and then they started charging.
Yes.
And then loads of people stopped.
Well, some places now have MRFs where you can actually use just a plain plastic bag and it'll still go through them. So there's loads of variation. So it's a big challenge. But at the moment, everybody's still not sure if it's really going to happen and how it's going to happen.
Yeah.
We've got a general election coming before that happens. There's so many things that
They've
could.
been round knocking on doors.
And
this week,
and government hasn't covered itself in glory in terms of actually implementing schemes. I mean, the Scottish DRS was weeks away from going live when they scrapped the whole thing.
Yeah,
so
they didn't make any friends there.
No, so people are naturally sceptical that is this really going to happen? Mm-hmm. I mean, in reality, 2 years is not very far away at all, but it feels like a really long way away. In other, from other angle, there's plenty of time for politicians to change their minds and do things differently.
Politicians change their mind. What are you suggesting?
Yeah, bizarre, isn't it? But people really need to be ordering caddies. They really need to be ordering vehicles if they're going to run a service in April 2026. But there's still too many unknowns about how it's going to work. Too many political variations. So you think you will probably leave your food in the garden bin, but you may have to do a separate food waste for those who don't subscribe.
Yeah, I mean, we're currently food waste is still in the garden bin for those people who have subscribed. It depends what this report comes back with for us that's assessing. We've asked for a couple of different options.
Do you know how much food's in the garden bins at the moment?
No, we have some really historical figures, but nothing that would give us. So no, not really. I mean, I think it's difficult for us because when the garden waste was free, it was commingled food waste. Yeah. So not really sure because how has that changed from then to the now with the chargeable?
You'd have to do a composition analysis, wouldn't you, to understand that?
Yeah.
That's a messy job. That nobody wants.
We've had obviously we had wrapped a report a few years ago which gave us some estimates, and obviously this feasibility report will give us some estimates, but we don't really.
No. Yeah, so I mean, on the subject of food waste, the other thing that you've got to implement is collections for everybody, so that includes communal collections.
Yeah.
How's that going to work?
Yeah, I mean, so I've worked for an authority before that's had food waste collections for a very long time. So I have some ideas of how to deal with communal food waste. I had a quick chat the other week with Cheshire West, who already do that. I mean, they just reinforced my experience with communal food waste. So it's difficult because you get no participation. When you do get participation, it's sometimes contaminated. There are some different bin options that are out there now, which I think are coming about because of simpler recycling. Whether they'll make a difference, I don't know. It'd be interesting to just see them. But yeah, food waste in apartments and flats, and it's never going to be easy. Because it relies on people bringing their kitchen caddy all the way down to put it into the communal bin. And if, it's going to work a bit better, I think, if you've got liners. Without liners. But I know
you need to be able to take your rubbish out.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to take your rubbish out, and then you take your food out. You're not going to do it otherwise, are you?
I know previously from experiencing food waste in flats and stuff before, a lot of people, even for the kitchen caddy, are like, I don't have anywhere to put it. There's not enough room. some, depending on your demographic in your area, you've got high turnover in those properties, which doesn't really, it's not great for consistency and consistent participation.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think obviously you could offer that service, or we have to offer that service to everyone, but what the participation would be like.
Yeah. And also, you go to live to pick up stuff that's eating very tasty.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose we're lucky in a way that we don't have any, or many, one where they have, shoots for waste.
Yes.
Which was being absolutely
food, wasn't it? Yeah.
But I think it's going to be the experience of introducing food waste into flats, apartments is just going to be exactly the same as I've already experienced. Quite tricky.
Yeah. Just need to issue every flat with a Labrador. There's no food waste.
Or a small pug.
A small pug, yeah.
Seems to, have a stomach like a TARDIS.
Right.
I reckon that's enough talking about garden waste and food waste for 1 week. So thank you so much for joining us today on the sofa and all your insights. And that's goodbye from Tim and me.
Bye.
Bye.